So, does mathematics prove the existence of God? Now, this is something that I have been interested in recently. I've been listening to some lectures and trying to dive into this concept of higher thinking, mathematics, even things like language and how that relates to God. And it really opened my eyes, and I wanted to share about it. The language part, where people talk about how language and reading and the fact that we can communicate through things like language proves existence of God, I'm a little skeptical about, only because like if I was to say mirror, right, and I had an idea of what a mirror is in my head, and I wanted to explain that to you, and we both settled on this word mirror, and I was like mirror, and you're like mirror, and I'm like no mirror, and you're like mirror, and I'm like mirror, and you go mirror, and we go yeah mirror this thing, okay, and they go oh, okay. That's just a way of us organizing reality. So it's a communication system of, obviously there are things in our head, that's a weird thing to think about. If everything is physical and there isn't some other, intangible, spiritual, mental world that has nothing to do with our physical, then how do you explain that? So that's maybe a different topic, and it doesn't relate to God. Maybe for some people it doesn't relate to God, but to me it does. But let's just look at that as like an organization system, and we're both just communicating our interpretation of physical things, like a mirror, right? Or a wall, or a light, or it doesn't matter, right? We're just interpreting what we see physical world as. There are relationships with that, but let's get rid of that for a second. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about mathematics, because I think that one is much more interesting in regard to the God thing. Why? Well, mathematics are, like language, a way for us to get our ideas in our head onto a form of paper and into an organizational way of organizing reality, okay? We probably didn't do a lot of that in school, right? We just did problems. So when I talk about mathematics, people might not understand. Well, math is the reason why we are able to communicate through this medium of technology. Why you have Wi-Fi, why you have internet access, why we have the phones. So all of that was created through mathematical principles, physics, that allowed us, which are equations, that allowed us to manipulate our physical reality into existence. So a mental idea, hey, I wonder if I could communicate with someone through a device really, really far away. I wonder if I could upload something so that people could see it on their device, video, right? So with that being said, you might liken it to language. Well, it's a representation. We use mathematics, and the actual equations themselves are arbitrary, like y equals mx plus b, the line formula, right? That one you might have learned in algebra. That is the y and the m and the x and the b, that's all, we could have made anything that. But the relationship of that equation does exist. The relationship of the physics equations that made this communication for us possible does exist. And that, whether we are here or not, still exists. That relationship between the two. The mathematics is just our way, with our brains and our hands and our technology that we have, writing it, first writing it down, now we can type it on computers or put it into a system. That is our way of interpreting these very real relationships. Whereas like me talking about a mirror, that's me and another person, or our humanity's way of interpreting these things and communicating with each other. So if we weren't here, the concept of mirror that's in our brain, it doesn't exist, okay? Now we created a mirror, but let's just say rock. That concept of rock, it's just a rock, but it doesn't have to be named and labeled and communicated. Do you see where I'm talking about? That's us putting our spin on reality. But if you take us out of here, the relationships of gravity between the sun and the earth and it going around, that still exists. all of reality, the electrical equations, to the way that the electromagnetism works, the way that the strong forces that keep an atom together, those things are still real in this physical reality. And when I look at those relationships that we represent through mathematics, I look at that and I go, that doesn't look random. The story of the antithesis of God would be that it's all random, that this is just a happenstance. It's this lucky chance that we ended up with life here in our existence. And I look at that and I go, that looks much more, when I look at how we can manipulate reality through these relationships that exist. We just use our brains to be able to manipulate them, and then we get light, then we get video, then we get the cloud, and then we get all this other stuff. That to me looks much more like a video game programmer, God, programming this and putting rules down that this system is governed by. That looks much more like intelligent design than random. To me, that's my interpretation of it. So when I think of, does mathematics prove God exists? To me, it was like this big, huge bomb going off in my head going, wait a second. These mental concepts, these things that exist whether we're here or not, but they are mental, they are not physical. The relationships between all of these different things, like I talked about with gravity and the strong force and electromagnetism, those things exist whether our mind was there or not. Our mind allows us to manipulate them. At least now with the technology that we have, we can manipulate those things and create things out of that. But that exists whether we're here or not. But it is not physical. It is not something that exists here. Now you might be saying, well, the physical exists, and so our interpretation of that relationship is our perspective on that relationship. But like I said, you can get rid of us and that relationship still is there. And it's a real relationship. Now you take it a step further. Our mental conception, before we could manipulate it, before we had technology, you see these from guys way years and years ago, they had ideas about, yeah, this seems like this would be possible. And then hundreds of years later, we took those equations and then made their thoughts a reality. Is like me thinking about the mental thinking, intelligent design, creating something like a video game. It created it. It went from thought to reality. There was a direct line. Whereas random, it's random, right? Things just happen. It doesn't look like it looks like a squiggly line, like up and down, and there's no pattern to it. That to me is random. I don't see straight line when I look at what we have today because of those relationships. And that's just my interpretation, because I feel like whether you want to call it a simulation or you want to call it God, to me, there's something outside of our physical that is projecting into our reality. And I think we get a glimpse into that through things like mathematics, some may say language, but the fact that we can't pinpoint where thoughts are, but yet those things are allowing us to actually physically change this reality, non-physical into physical. That to me is like God. God is non-physical. There's no point in space and time that you can pinpoint and go, that's God. It's not some guy up in the sky. That's my interpretation. I don't see some guy in a cloud with a big white beard and robes. That's not what I interpret God as. I interpret God as omnipotent, omnipresent, meaning all-knowing and all-encompassing, everywhere at all points in time, always existing. That projecting the non-physical, projecting onto physical reality is like when people were taking mathematical equations and interpreting what could be possible here. And then through technology, we were using those same equations to create and do things today. So for me, this was a really big jump in my own relationship with God, as you might say, because it started to make much more sense to me. I started to really connect the dots of what I felt. Like, it didn't feel random. And then to really see that these mental concepts, mathematics, the way that we are using, pen and paper or a computer to interpret the physical reality, but those relationships are there. So who created those relationships? Randomness? I just don't believe it just doesn't feel right to me, because I don't see randomness when we then take those equations and then create such beautiful things. Or some people might not find, a phone or technology beautiful, but in itself, it is manipulating reality on a very fine scale, which to me is beautiful. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. I don't know what you have your thoughts on it, and I know that there are other interpretations out there, and I know that there are debates about this stuff, but for me and where I'm at today, that's what I was struck with, and it was a very profound thing for me because it made me feel much more connected to the universe. And it was like, the thoughts, like, where are my thoughts and all this stuff. It's like a video game, right? If you looked at a video game character and the video game character was looking around and going, this is all there is. I am master of this universe, and all it is physical, and everything is here. You would laugh at them. You'd be like, you're such a small, tiny little spot, inside of a video game, inside this TV screen that is just a small speck of what is really going on. I feel like that's kind of what opened up my eyes, like, oh, maybe this is just a small little interpretation of God's grandeur being projected into this physical reality. And we've made sense of it by, coming up with theories about the Big Bang and stuff like that we make, but really there's something so much bigger going on. And I'm going to give you hints to that through these mathematical equations and physics equations, so that you can start manipulating like I am manipulating. You're not going to get to my level, and maybe we will, right? God level, and maybe that's the whole point. Maybe that's evolution. Maybe we evolve into being able to create a universe of our own. That might be the cycle of gods to some extent. And maybe we are gods, but we are in the making. We are not there yet, and that's the evolution over time. And maybe that's what it's all about. I don't know. But that kind of made more sense to me, to make me feel like there is something beyond this level of reality. So anyways, that's all I had for today. Just talking about the relationship between mathematics and God. I thought it was very interesting. It's helped me in my path to faith, strengthen it at least. And that's it for today. Bye.